talking to you about brand voice. Her Canberra has been established for about 3 years now. We've got a social media audience of around 15,000. A bit over 10,000 on Facebook, which is where most of our communication is. So I spend a lot of my time talking to people online, not very much in person, so this is a novelty for me. But as you just heard from Jamie and Claire, a brand is far more than just a logo. It's how people feel about your product or service, and while a logo is an important part of that, sometimes, particularly these days, the first impression that people have of a brand is on social media. And I guess in that case, people will notice the aesthetics, but it's kind of also your tone and what you're saying to them. In today's business world, we're communicating with our customers more often, and in a far more conversational way. So it's no longer just the kind of one-way communication from on to high where it used to be. Obviously, we still have advertisements in newspapers and radios, television, that one-way communication, but that growing sector of that two-way dialogue between business and consumer through social media is just continuing to explode. So I guess whereas you used to have, and you still do in more traditional media, have that chance to tweak things so that you can just get your tone and message just right, social media demands that you're able to respond quickly. So it means that you need to really have a good understanding of what your brand's voice is, and your personality to be able to build that authentic rapport. So the customer can now ask questions, comment, talk to you, criticise you, and even create with brands, be part of that process of actually, creating something and giving feedback, as if you're sitting right there in the room with them, and vice versa. So the brand can comment and converse right back in real time. So, it's really, social media offers opportunities for that connection like no other medium can. And look, for small businesses in particular, social media is a fantastic marketing tool. It's cheap. It offers great opportunities for reach and engagement. And you can be creative as well, and be creative cost effectively, which is a bonus. So I guess with social media, it's really essential that you and your staff, if you're devolving responsibility for that communication to them, understand your brand's personality and your voice. Successful brands are human, as we've heard. For the customer, it means there's an expectation of being treated like a real person. And that means they want a relationship with another human being. So that basically means your brand needs to act human. It needs to have personality, it needs to have character. And that will set you apart from the rest. So a brand's voice should be unique and recognisable, which seems, I guess, like a bit of a tall order, but when you consider the use of language in our everyday lives, we all have little sort of idiosyncrasies in terms that we use and the way that we speak, inflections, favourite expressions, all that sort of thing. And if you're on social media enough, you'll notice that certain business and accounts use certain phrases quite a lot. So Mamma Mia, for example, one that gets me is let's unpack this, shall we? Which drives me crazy, but we won't do it. But they're consistent, and as we've heard again, consistency is key for brands. Consistency in what you say it, how you behave, because there's that strong link between familiarity and trust. So I guess because something familiar requires little effort to process it mentally, and it's also, oh yeah, I know this person, you're more likely to sort of accept the messaging and more likely to feel at ease around it. Thinking along those lines, an organisation should be consistent in its use of language so that its voice becomes familiar to the customer. So creating a specific tone of voice plays a crucial part in that. American author Maya Angelou once said, "People don't always remember what you say, or even what you do, but they always remember how you made them feel. And it's often the way that we say something that breeds a certain feeling. And I think that's particularly the case on social media and in written communication, because you don't have that benefit of tone and context, apart from if you use emoticons and that sort of thing. But people can be really sensitive to language, and they can form impressions of people as from the moment they begin to hear or read their words. So how do you develop a voice? Well, a tone of voice is basically an expression of an organisation's or a person's values and way of thinking. It's not something that you can just kind of pluck out of thin air or create just on a whim. Basically, it needs to grow out of who you are as a business. And I think Jamie was saying, a brand needs to reflect who you are at the moment, but offer those opportunities for growth. So, your voice might evolve as you come along, but it needs to reflect what you are and what your business is at this point in time, because it's that authenticity that's the key. If your voice isn't a true reflection of you and your brand, then it's not going to ring true and people aren't going to accept that. So pinning down your values is basically the first step in that process. And so you want to ask yourself pretty simple questions like, what is it that you want to tell the world? You need to sort of understand that core purpose of your communication before you start to build your voice. You need to, think about why was the business set up in the first place. Get back to that initial spark of excitement that sort of started things off. What was the drive behind it? What's important to you? What things are important to you and your business? Is there some way different in the way that you work? Is there something different about your product or service? And in the end, why are you here? What are you hoping to achieve through your brand voice? In social media, your voice can really help customers understand what you want to do with and for them. Are you working to educate them? Are you wanting to delight them? Do you want to visit your store? Do you want to get them to think a certain way? Or do you want to amuse them or entertain them? Or sell things? Your purpose is really important, because that's going to dictate to a certain degree what you say and how you say it. So when you get back to your office or home or wherever it is you work from, I want you to do a little bit of an exercise which is quite similar to what Jamie was doing with sort of the mapping of brand values. So think about the values of your brand. So they can be adjectives like intelligent, professional, frank, or witty, or even non-descriptive words like love or think or best friend. Look around your office and see, are there certain words that kind of recur in your emails or in post-its or notes and that sort of thing, or even pick the brains of colleagues or friends and what they think, and see what recurring themes come up. For example, Apple, I think all branders talk about Apple because it's like the holy grail. Innovate, inspire, dream, or Red Bull, adventure, try, adrenaline. They're just things that fall out naturally and organically when you think of those particular brands. And then once you've defined those company values, you can start thinking about your personality. So your values are what you say, personality is how you say it. And it's easy to assume that you want a down-to-earth chatty style with a bit of humour, which is what you see a lot on social media, but that might not necessarily be what your customers want, because it's going to depend on what your business is, what sort of relationship you want to establish. So, have a think about that, and that's going to have an impact on the kind of language that you use. In terms of the basics, informal versus more formal language, look at your internal communication. How formal are, the people, so if you are dealing with a colleague, for example, how formal are you in your interactions? How formal are you in your interactions with your clients? When you're writing emails, do you sign off yours sincerely, or is it cheers or bye or see ya? Consider how you might talk to a client over the phone or face to face. What kind of language did you use? How formal is it? And that's going to vary over various platforms and contexts, so it's good to kind of identify an average level because, and I guess the degree to which you want to dial up or dial down, because you wouldn't necessarily write a brochure in the same kind of tone of language that you use on social media. Formal language can convey a sense of professionalism, as well as the qualities of being authoritative and respectful. On the flip side, it can run the risk of being stiff and lacking in personality. For example, we wish to inform you of a new offer currently available. In contrast, informal language can be more easily filled with personality, but it can be a little bit too carefree. So, watch out, we're chucking a new offer in your direction. So I guess it's, finding what works for you in terms of what you feel comfortable with and what you think that your audience is going to accept. I think we all have the tendency to express something clearly in spoken language, but then feel the need to kind of dress it up when we're writing it. Anyone who's ever worked in the public service will know what I mean. Writing a brief, you use 10 words when you could use 3. But I guess writing in a way that reflects how you speak doesn't necessarily mean your language must be very casual. You can still apply all the same manners and considerations, just not necessarily that formal structure, that rigidity. So when you're developing your personality, you might want to ask yourself, who does your brand sound like? Do you have a certain person in your head when you're sort of writing things? And again, you want to think of your customers when you're determining that. So if you're a non-profit that raises awareness of childhood diseases, maybe your character might be, more parental and or if you're a software tools company, a little bit of geekiness probably wouldn't go astray. So tone is the underlying vibe that emanates from your brand's communications, and this is where you establish your credibility. And also, I guess, alert your fans and your social media followers whether your brand's going to be a little bit more buttoned up or whether it's a little bit more casual and wide open. In terms of jargon, although your brand could be the expert in its field, coming off sounding like you're smarter than the consumers could be a put-off. But I guess it's, it's knowing what's appropriate. I mean, if all your customers are people that are going to understand a million acronyms and that sort of thing, it might be appropriate. And all of that comes down to knowing your brand and your customer. So once you've brainstormed around your brand voice attributes, you want to develop a roadmap for your brand's voice, which you can share with everyone who's involved in writing for or speaking for the brand. Because that goes to the consistency. There's no good you saying this is what our brand is and this is how we're going to speak if everyone else in your organisation isn't going to follow. You need that consistency throughout every level, as Claire was saying. How you dress, your fit out, what you say, how you say it, in order to build that successful and powerful brand. So, this roadmap can be as simple as a one-sheeter. Here's something I saw from the internet earlier. But, you could end up with something like that, where you might put your character or persona, what that might be. What's your tone going to be? What sort of language would fit in with that? And what's your purpose? It's just a way of getting it down, on paper, creating a shared understanding of what it is that you're here to do and how you're going to do it. So, I mean, for her Canberra, I think her Canberra's friendly. I hope it's warm. I think it's approachable, I hope. And I think that, our purpose is to connect women and more broadly now men who read the site with their city and to create a sense of excitement about the place that we live in, to engage with people, inform them about what's on. The language is interesting because it is always fairly approachable and conversational, but it can vary in terms of the writer and also the subject matter. So, for example, the language that I might use talking about the budget this morning is probably going to be very different than what I would use in talking about, 5 new places to eat. But it's always going to be that kind of very personal, written from the point of view of a Canberra woman just like you, kind of thing. It's not going to be the Canberra Times sort of, hard-hitting third-person journalism. It's not what we do. So, and it's a challenge for me. We've got a lot of writers, but probably a core team of about 20 who write things for us, and it can be a challenge trying to get a unified voice. And it's the same with any organisation that has a number of staff. But you know, it could be just something as simple as this, just some simple guidelines in terms of this is the brand that we're trying to create. We also are working on something. I don't like to call it a code of conduct because that sounds very public service and very... But when you do have a diverse range of people working for you and writing for you, there are certain expectations from a brand perspective of how people will behave and how they will represent the brand and what we expect of them. And although that goes a bit beyond brand voice in sort of a communication sense, if you have people representing you at events or functions or representing the brand, then there needs to be a very clear expectation of what you expect them to say and do, and the values, I guess, you wish them to espouse. So, you know, you want them to be respectful and friendly and all of those sorts of things. So, with this also, you might want to add some buzzwords, the words that describe your brand which you want to, which you've used when appropriate. For example, you know, if you're Disney, it might be like kingdom, magic, magical, family, fun, experience. All those words that, you know, might consistently come up in your communication. And also add some do's and don'ts guidelines like I was talking about, so people get a feel for the types of language and content that you expect. As I said before, your brand voice will evolve over time. It would be great to think that you're undertaking this kind of brand voice development before you hop onto Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. That's not always going to be the case. But you know, if you've been engaging in social media for a while and it feel like your voice needs refinement, just, you know, it's never too late to take the time to work on it. You can make those subtle changes, and I guess your fans and followers will probably won't even notice that there was a change if it happens sort of incrementally along the way. And just try and make it, I guess, make your voice match their needs and match your brand as closely as possible. And that's, I think, the key to greater engagement and greater brand loyalty. So that's all I had today. I think I've probably spoken enough. Happy for any questions.